Imagine standing next to a man who hasn't bathed in 20 years. The air around him is heavy, pungent, and almost alive. Now, picture an entire tribe of people like that sharing the same small cave, sleeping side by side, and never once touching soap or clean water. This wasn't a rare accident in history, it was everyday life for our ancestors. But here's the twist. What we think of as disgusting today may have been the scent of survival. We like to imagine cavemen as filthy, mud-caked figures, their hair wild, their bodies crawling with dirt and sweat. It's an easy mental picture after all. They didn't have showers, shampoo, or scented body wash. But here's the thing. That image is more Hollywood than history. Archaeologists and anthropologists have spent decades studying the daily lives of prehistoric humans. And the truth is a little more complicated. Cavemen didn't have access to our hygiene tools, sure, but they also weren't completely ignorant about cleanliness. Rivers, streams, and rain weren't just for drinking. Water was a natural part of their environment, and humans have always been curious and adaptive. Some cave sites show evidence of freshwater pools nearby, which means that even if they didn't bathe every day, they might have rinsed off occasionally, especially during warmer seasons. Washing could have been less about smelling nice and more about cooling off, cleaning wounds, or removing dirt after hunting. But here's the key difference. Cleanliness in the Stone Age wasn't about eliminating odor. There was no social expectation of smelling like flowers or citrus. In fact, the scent of the human body was just normal. Nobody was trying to hide it because there was no perfume culture yet. Our ancestors' understanding of hygiene was also tied to survival. They knew how to scrape animal fat off their skin after a hunt, how to pick lice from hair, and how to rub ashes or sand on the body to remove grease. In a way, these were primitive soaps, though they weren't designed for fragrance. So, were cavemen walking stink bombs? Not exactly. They carried a strong, earthy odor, yes, but to them, that smell wasn't offensive. It was the scent of daily life, of work, of living close to the land. And the wildest part, that caveman smell might have actually helped them survive. But we'll get to that soon. Picture this. A small group of early humans huddled around a fire deep inside a limestone cave. The flames flicker, casting long shadows on the rough walls, and the air is thick not just with smoke, but with the scent of human life. Sweat that's dried and layered over days. Animal hides that have soaked up the musk of the hunt. The faint tang of blood from freshly cleaned tools. To our modern noses, it's intense. But to them, it's background noise, like the sound of wind or the rustle of leaves. In fact, it may have been comforting. These smells told them they were among their own. Scientists studying modern-day hunter-gatherer tribes like the Hadza of Tanzania have noticed something fascinating. Natural body odor is often linked to identity. In the absence of deodorants and perfumes, scent can act like a personal fingerprint. Among close-knit groups, it's part of recognition and trust. Back in the Stone Age, this might have been crucial. You could tell your family from strangers just by scent. In the dark, or while hunting, that ability could save your life. A familiar smell meant safety. An unfamiliar one could signal danger. And when it came to cleaning, cavemen didn't think in terms of scrubbing away every trace of odor. Instead, they practiced what scientists call functional hygiene. They might rinse wounds with water, rub mud on insect bites, or scrape grime off skin with sharp stones. But the idea of bathing daily, stripping away all natural scent, would have seemed strange. Interestingly, some archaeological finds show hints of herbal use. Certain leaves, crushed roots, and ashes could have doubled as mild cleansers. But even these weren't for smelling pleasant, they were for healing skin, warding off pests, or keeping wounds from festering. So while our ancestors may not have been sparkling clean by today's standards, they weren't clueless either. Their world had its own rules, of hygiene rules shaped entirely by survival, not by social judgment. Here's something surprising. Smelling bad may have been a hidden survival advantage for early humans. In the wild, predators often rely on scent to track prey. A freshly washed, body clean, fragrant and free of natural oils might have been an easy signal that something tasty was nearby. But a human who smelled of smoke, sweat, and animal hides, that scent could mask their presence or make them blend into the environment. Fire played a huge role in this. Cavemen didn't just use it for warmth or cooking, they also sat near it for hours, letting the smoke seep into their skin and clothing. Smoke didn't just change their scent, it repelled insects and may have deterred certain predators. A smoky, earthy odor told the animal world, this isn't easy prey. Then there's the idea of natural bacteria. Modern science has shown that our skin hosts a vast community of microbes that help protect us from harmful germs. Constant bathing with modern soap strips these away. But our ancestors lived in balance with their skin's ecosystem. Their oils and bacteria may have offered natural protection, even if it meant carrying a strong odor. There's also the simple fact that in a dangerous environment, wasting time and energy on daily bathing didn't make sense. Every decision was about conserving calories and staying alive. If skipping a wash day meant you could hunt longer, gather more food, or avoid freezing in cold water, you skipped it. Survival first, comfort second. By the end of the Stone Age, this approach to hygiene had become part of human instinct. Smell wasn't the enemy, it was a tool. It told a story, where you'd been, what you'd eaten, and even who you belonged to. And as we'll see in the next chapter, those stories carried in scent created a world where bad smells weren't disgusting. They were life itself. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine stepping into a Stone Age cave. It's not a clean, empty cavern, it's alive with smells. The first thing you notice is the thick, smoky air. Fires have been burning here for days, maybe weeks, and the smoke clings to the damp cave walls like a second skin. It mixes with the earthy scent of wet stone, moss, and soil, creating an aroma that's heavy and almost suffocating. Then comes the human smell. Not one person's scent, but an entire tribe's, men, women, and children living close together, rarely washing, sharing the same air. Sweat dried on skin and layered over days. Hair that has absorbed the smell of smoke and grease from cooking meat. Clothing made from animal hides, never washed, still faintly carrying the scent of the animal it came from. And that's just the people. In the corner, animal bones from recent hunts are stacked or scattered, giving off a faintly sweet but unmistakable rot. The fire pit still carries the smell of charred fat, a reminder of the last meal. Insects buzz near the edges, adding their own faint musk to the mix. For us, it would be overwhelming, like stepping into a room where every bad kitchen, laundry, and campfire smell you've ever known has combined into one. But for early humans, this was normal. Their noses were tuned differently. What we'd call foul, they called familiar. These smells meant home, safety, and survival. And strangely enough, this constant environment of stench may have shaped their immune systems. Living among smoke, bacteria, and decay could have made them more resilient to illness, in ways we can barely imagine today. In the Stone Age, you didn't hold your breath to avoid a smell, you breathed it in, because it was part of who you were. If you were to meet a caveman face to face, you could learn more about him through your nose than your eyes. His scent would tell a story where he had been, what he had eaten, even what kind of day he'd had. A hunter who had just returned from the plains might carry the sharp, metallic tang of blood from a fresh kill, mixed with the musky odor of the animal's hide. A gatherer might smell of crushed plants, damp soil, and the faint sweetness of wild berries. Someone who had been sitting near the fire all day would be cloaked in layers of smoke, while another, who had been tanning hides, might carry the acrid smell of stretched, drying leather. Their skin, oils, rich and untouched by modern soap, held onto these scents like a diary. Even hair carried clues. Braided strands might smell of ash or pine resin if used as a natural binding, while loose, tangled locks could hold the faint scent of rain from an earlier downpour. This wasn't just a byproduct of life, it was a kind of identity. In a world without written language or photographs, scent was part of recognition. You could smell a friend approaching before you saw their face. You could detect an intruder by the unfamiliar sharpness in the air. Modern researchers studying indigenous tribes today have found that scent recognition among close-knit groups is startlingly accurate. People can identify family members, even in darkness, just by smell alone. For Stone Age humans, this ability wasn't a novelty, it was a survival skill. Of course, not all smells were pleasant, even to them. Rotting meat left too long, the stench of illness, or the unfamiliar scent of an outsider could all trigger alarm. But the daily stench of life, smoke, sweat, leather, and soil was as comforting to them as the smell of fresh coffee is to us today. In the Stone Age, scent wasn't just background, it was the language of the air. From the moment the first spark of daylight slipped into the cave, the smells of the Stone Age began their daily shift. Morning started with the fading embers of the night fire. The air was still heavy with smoke, but now it carried the faint sourness of bodies that had slept close together under animal skins. As people stirred, the sound of flint striking rock filled the space, reigniting flames. Soon, the scent of burning wood swelled again, sharper and cleaner than the lingering night air. Breakfast wasn't bread or porridge, it was often scraps of meat from the previous day's hunt, reheated over the fire. The smell of charred fat rose into the cave, mixing with the musty damp of the walls. Children, rubbing sleep from their eyes, added their own contribution to the air. The dusty scent of unwashed hair, the faint tang of smoke clinging to their skin. By midday, the cave's aroma grew richer. Hunters returned with fresh kills, the metallic smell of blood and fur strong enough to cut through the smoke. Animal hides were dropped on the floor, still carrying the scent of the wild grass, sweat, and fear. Meat was skinned, fat dripped into the flames, and the air filled with a greasy haze that clung to everything. As the sun dipped low, the atmosphere thickened again. The fire was stoked high for warmth. Herbs and roots, tossed into the flames for cooking or healing, released sharp, earthy scents that momentarily overpowered the smell of people. But as night closed in, the human scent reclaimed its dominant sweat from the day's work. Oil from skin, smoke from the fire, and the slow rot of discarded bones in the shadows. By nightfall, the cave was a sealed container of life itself, a dense cloud of survival, hunger, and warmth. To us, unbearable. To them, the most familiar comfort in the world. If you told a caveman that he smelled bad, he probably wouldn't even understand what you meant. In his world, there was no such thing as smelling wrong. There was only smelling human. For Stone Age people, survival was the only priority. Every action, every habit, was judged by one measured, does this help me live another day? Smelling fresh, like flowers or soap, had no place in that equation. In fact, The very things we call dirty today, smoke in the hair, oils on the skin, sweat in the clothes, were often tools of survival. Take dirt, for example. To us, it's something to wash off. But to a caveman, a layer of earth on the skin could act as natural camouflage, breaking up the human silhouette and masking scent from predators. The oils in their skin, untouched by soap, helped keep moisture in and acted as a barrier against cold winds. Sweat, far from being an embarrassment, cooled the body during hunts and physically carried pheromones that signaled health, fertility, or dominance to others in the group. Then there was smoke, the ultimate multi-purpose scent. It clung to everything: hair, hides, tools, even food. But it wasn't just a side effect of cooking. Smoke repelled biting insects, masked human scent from sharp-nosed predators, and may have even killed bacteria on skin and clothing without them realizing it. In a world full of dangers, smelling like smoke could be the difference between life and death. Washing away these smells regularly would have been pointless, maybe even dangerous. You'd lose the camouflage, the natural oils, and the protective scent barrier that your body built up over days. And when water was icy, cold, or scarce, the risk of bathing catching illness, wasting energy, wasn't worth it. In the Stone Age, fresh didn't mean clean. Fresh meant alive, fed, and strong enough to see another sunrise. And that meant carrying the smell of your life with you always. In a modern office, your scent might influence whether someone sits next to you on the bus. In a Stone Age tribe, it could influence whether people followed you into a hunt or whether they trusted you with their life. Among early humans, smell wasn't just a byproduct of living, it was a form of communication. A strong, healthy scent could be a silent signal of vitality. The scent of fresh sweat, mixed with smoke and the earth, might tell others you'd been active, working, and providing for the group. It could also indicate youth, strength, or fertility, or valuable traits in a survival-driven society. Leaders weren't chosen by scent alone, of course, but odor played into the subtle social dynamics of a tribe. A hunter who consistently brought back food would carry the aroma of cooked meat, animal fat, and smoke scents tied to survival and abundance. This could create a subconscious association. This person keeps us alive. Even in mating and relationships, smell was deeply important. Without perfumes or modern hygiene, people relied on their noses to detect compatibility. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer communities suggest that natural body odor can reveal genetic information, helping people choose partners whose immune systems are a good match for producing healthier offspring. Back then, your scent could literally be a biological advertisement. There was also the flip side. Certain smells could lower someone's standing in the group. The scent of untreated wounds, infection, or prolonged illness could signal weakness. People might instinctively keep their distance, not out of cruelty, but out of survival instinct, to avoid contagion. In this way, odor worked almost like an invisible language. Without saying a word, you could project strength, warn of danger, or signal attraction just by how you smelled. In a world where survival was always on the line, your scent wasn't just personal, it was part of the tribe's collective safety net. To us, a bad smell is something to cover up. To a caveman, it could be a shield. Predators like wolves, big cats, and even bears relied heavily on scent to hunt. A freshly washed human, smelling only of clean skin, might have been an obvious, tempting signal to a hungry animal. But a person whose scent was layered with smoke, sweat, dirt, and animal hide, that was harder to pinpoint and sometimes unappealing. The mingling of these smells created a kind of olfactory camouflage, making it difficult for predators to identify a human as prey. Smoke was the most powerful part of this armor. It didn't just mask scent, it irritated the sensitive noses of insects and some animals. Sitting near the fire for hours, letting the smoke soak into clothing and hair, was like applying a natural repellent. Some researchers believe this was a deliberate practice, even if early humans didn't fully understand the science behind it. Then there's the role of natural oils and bacteria. Today, we scrub our skin to remove them. But in the Stone Age, they formed a living barrier. Skin microbes competed with harmful bacteria, sometimes preventing infections. Oils helped block dirt and moisture from penetrating too deeply, acting like a weatherproof coating. Even the smell that came from this mixed the strong, musky odor of an unwashed body may have signaled to parasites or small predators that this was a mature, resilient creature, not easy prey. And here's an interesting thought. Certain bad smells might have warned off other humans, too. The scent of rot from an old wound, or the acrid smell of sickness, could make others keep their distance, reducing the spread of contagious diseases before anyone understood what germs were. In this way, smell was both a social tool and a health defense. To us, it's unthinkable to go weeks without washing. To them, it was a calculated balance, staying just dirty enough to survive. When we think of romance, we picture flowers, perfume, maybe a candlelit dinner. For caveman, romance started with something far more primal than those. In the Stone Age, you didn't choose a mate based on smooth skin or a nice smile alone. Attraction often began with scent, without artificial fragrances, deodorants, or shampoos. The smell of a person was completely natural, an unfiltered signature of who they were. And that scent carried powerful information. A potential partner's odor could tell you what they'd eaten, whether they were healthy, and even if their immune system was genetically compatible with yours. Modern science has shown that humans can subconsciously detect genetic differences through scent, often preferring partners whose immune systems are different enough to produce stronger, healthier offspring. Cavemen didn't know the science, but their instincts led them in the same direction. For men, the smell of a healthy, fertile woman carried in natural body oils and subtle hormonal signals was deeply attractive. For women, the scent of a strong, capable hunter, layered with smoke, sweat, and the musk of animal hides, could signal protection and provision. What we might consider odor today, they considered proof of survival skills. This doesn't mean everyone smelled the same. A man who spent his days fishing would carry the briny scent of water and fish oil. A woman who gathered herbs and plants might have faint traces of crushed leaves and wildflowers in her hair. These subtle variations made each person's scent as unique as a fingerprint. Courtship, if we can call it that, wasn't about hiding or masking these smells, it was about sharing them. Sleeping close, sitting by the same fire, or exchanging food, all helped potential partners become familiar with each other's scent. Over time, that familiarity could deepen into trust, attraction, and love. In the Stone Age, the language of romance wasn't whispered, it was breathed in. Once two people in the Stone Age formed a bond, scent became the glue that held that connection together. In a world without photographs, written messages, or long-distance communication, the human nose was one of the most reliable ways to recognize and feel comforted by a partner. Sleeping close each night meant sharing body heat, but it also meant sharing scent. Over time, each partner's odor became a deeply familiar signal of safety. Even after days apart, perhaps while hunting or gathering, one whiff could instantly bring back that sense of belonging. This wasn't just emotional, it was biological. Studies today show that our brains can link a partner's scent to feelings of security, calm, and even reduced stress. For prehistoric couples, this connection had survival value. Knowing your partner's scent meant you could find them in a crowd, identify them in the dark, or even sense their presence before they spoke. This would have been critical in a noisy hunting camp or during migrations when many people gathered together. Scent also helped maintain loyalty. If a partner returned carrying a new, unfamiliar scent, perhaps the odor of another group's camp or the perfume of plants not found nearby, it might trigger suspicion. In small tribes where trust meant survival, scent could act as an invisible truth-teller. Parenthood added another layer. Newborns quickly learned their mother's scent, allowing them to calm at her touch. Likewise, parents could identify their children by smell, alone important in crowded camps where many people shared close quarters. What's fascinating is that attraction and bonding weren't about removing or hiding these scents. They were about embracing them. A partner's natural smell was part of who they were, and losing it could feel like losing the person entirely. For early humans, love was physical. Yes, but it was also olfactory. Their relationships were literally built on the breath between them. In the tight quarters of a Stone Age camp, romance didn't happen in private. It unfolded in the middle of everyday life, surrounded by family, friends, and rivals. That meant attraction wasn't just about charm or skill, it was about making your scent stand out in a crowd. When several people were interested in the same partner, competition could turn into a battle of aromas. A skilled hunter might return to camp covered in the warm, smoky scent of a fresh killer smell tied to food, strength, and protection. Someone less successful might try to match that by sitting longer near the fire, letting the smoke sink deep into their skin and hair, mimicking the scent of a provider. For women, scent could also be a subtle signal during courtship. Natural hormonal changes during certain times of the month made body odor more appealing to potential partners without any conscious effort. Combined with traces of the plants they gathered, berries, wild herbs, or flowers, each woman carried a scent profile that was uniquely her own. But scent wasn't always an advantage. A person carrying the odor of illness, injury, or poor diet could be less attractive. Not because of vanity, but because those smells hinted at weakness in a world where every member of the group needed to contribute to survival. A strong, healthy scent was a silent advertisement. I am capable, I am well fed, I can keep us alive. Even group events, like communal feasts or rituals, were scented affairs. The air would be thick with the aromas of roasting meat, burning wood, and human sweat. In this sensory overload, a partner's familiar scent could cut through the chaos, guiding someone to them in the crowd. Romance in the Stone Age wasn't whispered in candlelit rooms. It was breathed in through smoke-filled air, carried on the skin, and sealed in memory by the nose. Love wasn't just seen or heard, it was smelled. For most of human history, scent was simply a fact of life, an honest reflection of the body, the environment, and the work of the day. But as societies evolved, so did attitudes toward smell. What once signaled health, skill, and attraction began to be judged by entirely new standards. The first major shift came with the rise of permanent settlements. Living in closer quarters for longer periods meant human scent built up quickly, and not all smells were pleasant. With agriculture, people spent more time near livestock, waste, and stagnant water odors that could easily overwhelm the subtle perfume of a person's natural skin. The need for cleanliness wasn't about vanity, yet it was about survival. Washing became a way to prevent illness, and herbs or oils were used to mask foul smells. Then came trade. From the markets of Mesopotamia to the ports of ancient Egypt, spices and resins traveled across continents. Frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, and rose oil weren't just luxuries, they were status symbols. A pleasant scent now hinted at wealth and refinement. The natural aroma of the body began to compete with the crafted aromas of the marketplace. Religious and cultural influences also shaped ideas about cleanliness. In some ancient societies, bathing became a ritual act tied to purity, both spiritual and physical. In others, scent was believed to have the power to ward off evil spirits or disease. People didn't just want to smell good, they wanted to smell protected. This was the start of a slow but dramatic transformation. Instead of embracing the honest, earthy scent of survival, humans began chasing the idea of controlling and reshaping their smell. The natural perfume of sweat, skin, and smoke was gradually replaced or, at least, hidden by oils, soaps, and later, perfumes. It was a change that would eventually lead to a complete redefinition of attraction. From healthy scent means good mate to clean and fragrant means desirable. As cities grew, so did the pressure to smell acceptable. In crowded streets, where thousands of bodies moved in close quarters, the natural scents of sweat and work were impossible to ignore. But for the wealthy, there was an easy solution: distance. They lived in airy homes, surrounded by gardens, far from the dense neighborhoods where odors lingered. This physical separation created a new kind of social divide. The rich didn't just look different, they smelled different. Perfume became more than a pleasant accessory, it was a declaration of status. Expensive scents, often imported from faraway lands, told the world that you could afford not to smell like everyone else. Soap production grew into a specialized craft, and those who could buy it regularly were seen as more refined. Cleanliness itself became a luxury. Meanwhile, for the working class, washing was often limited by access to clean water. Their scent carried the traces of their daily labor: sweat from fields, smoke from fires, the sharp tang of tannery work, or the metallic hint from blacksmithing. These smells told a story of survival, but in the rising social order, they began to be seen as undesirable. This change wasn't just about personal preference, it was enforced by social rules. In elite gatherings, a bad smell could cost you reputation, opportunity, even marriage prospects. Etiquette guides from medieval Europe warned against offending the nose, and servants were often required to wash more frequently than their employers, not for their own benefit, but to maintain the image of the household. By the early modern period, the connection between smell and morality was deeply ingrained. A clean person was assumed to be disciplined, respectable, and trustworthy. A smelly one was considered lazy, careless, or even sinful. This moral layer meant that controlling one's scent was no longer optional, it was an expectation. The human nose, once a tool for finding a healthy partner or sensing danger, was now a social weapon. People judged and were judged by the faintest whiff, and this shift would only accelerate as new technologies made scent control more powerful than ever. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how people lived, changed how they smelled. Factories brought mass production to perfume, soap, and deodorant. For the first time in history, pleasant scents weren't reserved for the elite. Even the working class could buy a small bottle of fragrance or a bar of scented soap. But industry also brought a new problem: pollution. Cities filled with coal smoke, chemical fumes, and the acrid scent of machinery. Natural body odors were now layered with the grime of industrial life. Marketing seized on this, promoting cleanliness not only as a luxury, but as a necessity for health and success. Advertisements warned that smelling bad could cost you friends, jobs, and romance. Suddenly, scent wasn't just about personal taste, it was about identity. Companies sold the idea that wearing their product would make you more attractive, more confident, more modern. The message was clear: if you didn't control your scent, you risked social failure. Science joined the effort. Chemists learned to create synthetic fragrances that could mimic rare ingredients at a fraction of the cost. Musk, once sourced from deer, was now made in laboratories. Jasmine, rose, and sandalwood could be recreated without ever touching a flower or a tree. These synthetic scents were consistent, powerful, and, most importantly, profitable. The result was a new kind of attraction, one driven less by biology and more by branding. People began choosing partners not just for who they were, but for how they smelled artificially. A whiff of a certain cologne or shampoo could trigger desire, not because of pheromones, but because of the memories and emotions the marketing had attached to it. By the late 20th century, the natural scent of the human body was nearly invisible under layers of product soap, deodorant, shampoo, laundry detergent, body lotion, and perfume. What people called attraction was often the careful work of industrial chemistry. The human nose, once tuned to detect health, fertility, and compatibility, now danced to the tune of advertisements and designer bottles. And in this new world, the most seductive scent wasn't always the one nature intended. When you think about it, the smell of a caveman wasn't just about sweat or dirt, it was the scent of survival. Every whiff of smoke, animal fat, and unwashed skin told the story of someone fighting the cold, the hunger, and the wild. We might wrinkle our noses now, but back then, that odor meant you were alive and strong enough to see another sunrise. So, next time you step out of a hot shower, imagine living a life where water was for drinking, not rinsing off, and where every smell told the tale of your journey. Would you survive, or run back to your soap? If you enjoyed this trip back in time, hit subscribe and stick around. We've got plenty more strange and fascinating history waiting for you.